He was a good man. He had his bad days, of course, but he was a good man. He struggled in ways I couldn't understand until I was older, but he tried. Mom always told me that, since before I could remember. He or Mom would send me to bed early, and I'd hear muffled, a lot of times slurred, arguing through the walls. He'd come home acting strange, and she didn't call him out for it. They'd yell, but that was all. If I ever saw anything I wasn't supposed to, him acting a certain way, Mom would pull me aside and tell me that Dad was being funny, and he wasn't in his right mind. That he wasn't Dad right now, and I'd wonder who he was instead. The next day, he'd always be fine, but he'd say he had a headache. I'd ask what was wrong, and he'd say, "Dad's in the doghouse, little man." He used to tell me that drinking was bad, and I should never do it. But I'd get confused. I'd ask, "What about water?" And he'd laugh like it was the funniest thing. "Yeah, you could drink water. Water's good for you. You need water." "What about milk?" I didn't like milk as much, but he said that was okay too. And I'd keep going down the list of my favorite drinks. Fruit punch, Sprite, Dr. Pepper, orange juice. Each one he'd say was good to drink, but that I should never have too much soda. I never got any drink he said was bad altogether. Then again, I didn't understand what he was saying in the first place. I didn't know it at the time, but that gave him some comfort. Listening to me ask a bunch of questions I didn't fully understand. It was just us, talking, and that was enough. He'd laugh and he'd make me laugh too. On the best days, he'd even get a chuckle out of Mom. That's the worst it got. Arguments I could barely hear, lulling me to sleep. And the next day, things would be almost normal. He never hurt us, never even raised his voice. Not till one night. I know it was 1995 when I was 9. It was a Saturday. I was already up late, way past 11. He would work late too, always getting back home after dark. But that night, he just didn't come home. Wouldn't answer his phone either. I watched from the stairs as Mom was frantically talking on the landline, pacing the kitchen, writing down numbers and names while the cord coiled around her legs. She was scared, and that made me scared. She called out to me to go back to bed, but how could I? I waited up, hid out of sight, listened to what I could of what was said on the phone. Hours past midnight, and police were talking to her through the doorway. They found his truck way out on the country road. Door was open, and the engine was still running. Windshield was cracked, and it looked like he hit a deer. But there was no deer in the road, and there was no Dad anywhere. They found his clothes too, torn up and scattered in the woods, miles away. They were delicate about telling Mom that they found any blood, but they were able to show her pictures that made her stop, cover her mouth, and cry. Foul play, right? I heard the police say that more than once, and I honestly thought, they play baseball too? Stupid. Mom was inconsolable. I heard her muttering, "Presumed dead," over and over to herself. She hid behind walls of denial, but with every word, they came crashing down. That far away from his truck, his clothes, his shoes, his blood, vanished without a trace. She didn't tell me, but she knew. I think I did too. Dad wasn't coming home. We went to church and prayed, and Mom asked her friends to pray too. All the while, I saw her twirling her necklace, a little silver cross, in her fingers, like it was a charm she was rubbing to make our prayers come true. But we were asking for different things. I was asking against all hope for him to come back. She was asking for his body to be found, and his soul to be at rest. Regrettably, it was mine that was answered. I was in the living room watching Jurassic Park, and I just got to the part where they find the Triceratops that they think got sick from eating poisonous plants. But she didn't. I saw it in the theater with Dad when I was 7, and I must have seen it a dozen times since. I always wondered what was actually wrong with that Triceratops, whether she was poisoned or if she was pregnant. But the movie never said for sure. Dad said he thought she was pregnant, but admittedly, he really didn't know either. I hated not knowing. Mom was making hamburgers on a skillet on the stove for dinner. Both of us were just going through the motions, trying to pretend things were normal when there was a knock at the door. I thought it was another policeman, so I turned up the volume. Mom went and stood frozen stiff, looking through the peephole. Slowly, hesitantly, she opened it. "David?" Her voice rang out, louder than I expected. In a flash, I switched the TV and ran to the edge of the hallway, peering out to the door. Dad was standing there, outside, wearing torn and stained clothes that weren't his, jeans ripped at the ankles. He was barefoot, covered in dirt, and he stood still like he was in shock. "I lost my truck," Dad murmured like he was lost in thought. "I don't know what happened." "The police were here. You went missing last night." "Did I?" He seemed genuinely confused. "Huh." I heard the sizzling of the pan from the next room. "What do you remember?" Mom pressed. He sighed, rubbing his head. "I think I hit something." "I'm going to call someone, okay?" No, Sharon, please." He gulped, eyes widened as he was reaching through the threshold. Mom stepped back, looked over her shoulder at me. It was the first time I'd seen her truly afraid of him. She held her arm straight back as she stepped, guiding me towards her. Dad's eyes were tired, bloodshot, staring at me, tucked behind Mom's apron. He smiled a toothy grin at me. "Hey, little man." I didn't know how to feel. I held up a reluctantly waving hand. "Hi, Dad." Mom held me closer. Dad stepped in, tracking mud under his hairy feet. "Hey, it's okay, Lee. I'm okay. Really, I'm just..." He sniffed in the air and he breathed in deep. I remember just how large he looked standing in front of the door, the orange glow of the setting sun behind him. "I'm just so hungry." He ran past us into the kitchen. Mom clutched me tight to her back as I looked around her, watching Dad hunch over the oven, grabbing handfuls of meat from the sizzling pan, snarling as he ate. He groaned as he did, but he sighed after every bite, all his attention on eating. In that moment, I remember thinking, maybe he was poisoned. "Ah, Christ," he yelled, but he sounded happy. "I missed your cooking, Sharon, and God, it's never been this good." She backed us slowly into the living room, eyes fixed on his wide back. I remember being worried that Mom was going to squish me between her and the couch. She pulled me in front of her and worriedly looked from him to me. "Lee, baby, go finish watching your movie in Mom and Dad's room, okay?" A metallic crash sounded from the kitchen, Dad tossing the empty pan onto the tile. I felt the sting of grease on my face, like a hot pinprick. Mom shouted, "David!" I'm sorry, I just..." He was frantic, wide, stepping to the sink, throwing on the faucet and shoving his head under the cascading water to drink, like he was trying to dunk himself. "Don't come out till I say. Go, now." Mom shoved me toward the stairs, and I ran to her room. I did as she said and went up, but I still listened to her. More yelling. Sometimes it was loud. I couldn't always tell which of them it was. "What the fuck is wrong with you? You're acting up over nothing. You're not yourself, David. Who are you trying to call? Get the fuck off me!" The yelling and footsteps just got louder, alongside crashing sounds from the kitchen. Things breaking, things hitting the wall, glass breaking. They never fought like this. They'd never fought, ever. But here I heard them banging on the walls, screaming like I never heard before. I ran onto their bed and under the covers, pulling them up closer to me. All I did, all I felt I could do was stare at the light under the door, no matter how loud they got, how much crashing there was downstairs. I felt deep down that it'll all be over soon. That's when I started hearing the weird sounds. And amongst the thuds and screams, a howling roar that reminded me of a T-Rex. But it was just downstairs, just outside the room. I pulled the covers closer, thinking that'd do anything. I saw the shadow of legs under the door, and I closed my eyes. I heard the door open and shut in no time at all, and heavy breathing. I opened my eyes to see Mom bracing the door with her body. She stood leaning against it, holding a butter knife covered in blood between her teeth, while she fumbled with the door lock, looking at me with wide red eyes. Her green apron was torn, hanging from her shoulders. One of the legs of her sweatpants was completely gone, and the skin underneath was bleeding all the way down. She had gashes in her cheek and her temple, and her curly wet hair just was wrong. It was humped straight up at the top of her head like she was wearing a hat underneath her hair. It was only when she turned around to me that I saw it. A part of her scalp was folded up off her head, hanging by the hairs. She was bleeding from her scalp all along her forehead, like she was wearing a dripping red bandana. She kept blinking and using her wrist to wipe her eyes, her left arm hanging limp from her shoulder. That necklace she always wore was speckled in blood right at the foot of the cross. As soon as she got the lock smearing the doorknob, she used the same shaky hand to grab the knife from her teeth. She sighed. She was hurt, and she was scared. I could see it in her eyes. She was so scared. But she smiled at me. Lee, baby, I need you to get up, okay? I threw off the covers, even though I was almost scared to go near her. She limped through the room on her bloody leg to the window, shoving it open, letting in a cold breeze from the outside. Come on, baby. She beckoned me with 3 fingers and the knife. I went to her, and she lifted me up with one arm, grunting as she hoisted me onto the terrace just outside her room, a little piece of roof that barely fit me. It was so cold, and I was about to ask what was happening, where was Dad, when a loud bang sounded from the other side of the door that shook the room. Mom looked from the door to me. You hide out here, and you wait as long as you can, okay? You wait until it's over. Till what's over? I asked. Another bang at the door, and a snarl from the other side. I could hear the splintering of wood from whatever was hitting it. She held the side of my face. The handle of the knife was so cold. You stay here, okay? I love you. Dad loves you. She kissed my forehead and backed herself into the room. Mom! I yelled. An even louder bang. The wood boards falling apart. I could start to see the black shape behind them. Stay! Mom yelled back, closing the window. I tried looking through, but the curtains fell in behind my mom as I heard the muffled sounds of the door breaking down. That roaring scream again, and Mom yelling and cursing louder than I'd ever heard. They were fighting again. Louder, closer, more painful than before. I couldn't look even if I wanted to, so I sat. It sounded like a tornado in that room, tearing everything apart. For as long as it went, I just sat there on that little piece of roof, burying my face into my knees as I held them close to my chest, rocking myself, waiting for it to be over. It felt like I was sitting under there forever, under that bright full moon, hearing the carnage rage inside, hearing it slowly start to wind down, the occasional heavy thud, and wondering what that meant. But really it was only a couple of minutes before I started hearing the sirens in the distance, and seeing the red and blue lights flashing turn a corner onto our street. I later learned that it had been a noise complaint from a concerned neighbor. I heard the snarling from inside my room, and gurgling, and loud, heavy footsteps back out the bedroom door. Police! I heard from the front of the house. I could see through the curtains that there was nothing there, a shadow on the other side of the hallway making its way downstairs. I slid open the window and saw my mom lying on the floor, curled into a ball. She was torn to pieces, but she was still alive, her neck pressed to the floor against her broken arm, still clutching that knife. Downstairs, voices I didn't recognize. Police were screaming. Oh God, it's a bear! Reynolds, get the shotgun! I heard the loud pops of a handgun and pain bellowing. Reynolds, the shotgun! Mom looked up at me. Through all the scratches, the blood, the bone, I could see through the right side of her head. I could see she had the same look on her face as when she was too tired to stay up watching a movie. Even as she lay dying, her beautiful face I'd known all my life scratched to ribbons. She still smiled at me. Baby. With all the last of her strength, she reached up and shakingly folded the knife into my hands. I hurt him with this. Her eyes flared for one last time before she died. Run. Her eyes didn't close. They just stared into the middle distance and kept staring. Her lips stopped moving. She stopped smiling. Every time I think back on that now, I wish I would have closed her eyes for her. I think I was afraid that poking her eyes would still, somehow, hurt her. She used to say I always beat her at staring contests. I had the knife in my hand, and I got up and walked, like I was a tin soldier marching underwater, like how you feel in a dream, you know? It's like I didn't feel it all the way through because how could this not be a dream? The gunshots got louder downstairs as I walked slowly down each step. There were claw marks all the way up and down the stairs, pictures from the foyer thrown into the living room, the kitchen phone ripped out of the wall. The thing groaned and growled in pain, but it didn't last. It kept coming back no matter what they did. It was all useless. I saw it, dragging the younger cop's body through the hallway. It didn't see me. It looked like a bear, but it was long and thin. The hair on its back was thick and matted and black. It was crouched over him like a chimpanzee. It was eating him. I walked slow. Somehow I wasn't scared, but I wasn't brave either. I didn't know what I was. I felt numb, and I held with the knife over its arched back. It reminded me of Little League, holding that bat up to play. Mom and Dad cheered from the stands. "Son, get away from it!" I heard a desperate voice shouting loud from behind me. The bear thing snapped its long snouted face back over its shoulder towards me. I saw its long, bloody white teeth, a single bright yellow eye glaring at me, its clawed hand reaching out. Swing! I threw the weight of my entire body behind that little knife that felt so long in my hand. I was so close, I was almost hugging it. Its hand was covering one side of my face, its leathery padded palm pressing into my cheek, while the other side was buried in the soft, fine fur of its chest. Ear-shattering is the only word that does justice to its wailing pain. A howl, but also a scream from the deepest part of itself. No matter how hard its claws dug into my head, I still heard the sharp ringing in my ear. I could hear it dying. I still do sometimes. It fell over with a hard, heavy thud, claws scraping my cheek and my forehead, barely missing my eye. The knife had nearly disappeared into its chest, and I just stood there, staring. I couldn't hear what the officer was saying over his radio, but he knelt down to me, leading me to his car. Bear loose in residential neighborhood kills 3 people, 1 police. Bear shot dead on scene by sheriff. That's what the story was. What everyone heard and winced at, and passed on to their shocked friends. It had to be a bear. Anything more just wasn't possible, they said. I only saw it, lived it, killed it myself, bear the scars from it. But I was 9. I was traumatized. What did I know? I knew no one reported any bear wandering into the suburbs miles away from the woods. I knew no one in the neighborhood saw a bear being pulled out of that house. And I knew that my dad, victim number 3, showed no signs of an attack. 4 random razor cuts on his forearm, a tiny gouge in his left eye, a little wider than a pinprick, and a silver butter knife embedded in his heart. I don't know why I never cried, even at the funeral. It felt like everyone else was doing all the crying for me. And I always thought that from the way they looked at me, that somehow they felt more sorry for me than they did for them. I never liked that. I lived with my aunt and uncle for a while in a state without wild bears. While that honestly didn't put my mind at ease, for their sake, I pretended it did. It made them feel better, believing they kept me safe. Even if I was just sleeping with stolen silverware under my pillow and praying with Mom's silver cross every night since. She kept me safe, and I believe she still does. The sheriff knew, or even if he didn't know, he saw. Who knows what he thought in the end? I go back and forth between he was protecting me and he was protecting his own mind. Maybe both. And there's no shame in that. I don't blame him. And I never said anything to counter the narrative. I never wanted it that my dad was some monster. He wasn't. That wasn't his fault. That wasn't him. I know that. And I carry that with me everywhere I go.